Hello and welcome to the Genuine Learning Blog. My name is Melissa Galasso, and today we have a 2-for-1 special. 2 different proposals, 1 blog, both of them by FASB. The first one is target improvements to leases. Now with the adoption of 842 by public companies, a few issues came to their attention that they wanted to address. And then reference rate reform. Again, we have ASU 2020-04, but there have been some questions about its scope. So let's dive on in. Our first ASU is going to be leases, issued on October 20th. Comments are due December 4th. This one is really looking at 3 implementation issues that they identified during the implementation of Topic 842. So when we think about this, they've had some public roundtables now, they've gotten some feedback, and some people have brought some things to their attention that they've decided they wanted to address. So the first question is related to sales type leases with variable lease payments. So remember, for lessors, we have 3 types of leases. We have sales type, direct financing, and operating leases. With sales type leases, a lessor is not permitted to estimate the variable payments. So as a result, variable payments that are not estimated and that do not depend on an index or rate are not included in the lease receivable. And so as a result, in the new standard 842, you take the existing asset off of your books, and then you recognize that net investment in lease, which includes that lease receivable. So as a result, you're ending up with a loss at commencement. And it's not fair because that's not really the economics of this, right? So as a result, it's not actually depicting the actual underlying economics of the lease. It's really because of when they're going to recognize that. And so in this proposal, they are trying to come and address this. Lessors would be required to classify and account for these lease payments that are predominantly variable and do not depend on an index or rate as operating. So instead of looking at the 5 criteria that we normally use for operating versus direct financing or for sales type leases, they would automatically be operating leases. And operating leases, we do not derecognize the asset. Lessor accounting is basically the same as it was before for operating leases. And so this would get rid of that sort of day 1 loss issue. The second issue here is related to options to remeasure. And again, this is now for the lessee. Topic 842 prohibits a lessee from remeasuring solely because of a change in a reference rate. So if there's something else, right, then we trigger remeasurement and we look at the reference rate, but we don't remeasure. And that was to reduce cost and complexity, honestly. There was feedback from entities that having to, every time the reference rate changed, have all these remeasurements, they were a little bit concerned about that. As a result, they actually prohibited it. However, IFRS requires a lessee to remeasure. And so for those entities who are going to be following both, it creates cost and complexity, right? So as a result of this, if they're preparing financial statements in accordance with both GAAP and IFRS, they have 2 different sets of accounting they have to follow. And so basically what they're going to do here is they give them an option. If you don't follow IFRS, the current GAAP is probably easier not to trigger remeasurement. However, if you do have to follow IFRS as well, it allows you to pick whatever is the most cost-effective option for you. You would now have the option, again, it is entity-wide, to remeasure leases for changes in reference rate. So this is giving that option to assist with those entities who do comply also with IFRS. And then last but not least in this area, relating to modifications that reduce the scope. Obviously, COVID-19 probably made this a little bit more popular. So if a lease contract providing a lessee with the right to use multiple assets is modified, in those scenarios, we actually require that you have to go back and look at the classification and adjust the accounting for the remaining components. So say there's 3 items in this lease and we terminate one of the 3, we trigger basically a remeasurement, even if there's nothing changing economically with the 2 other items. Just because we terminate the first one, it requires us to then trigger remeasurement. And people again said, triggering remeasurement, if there's nothing actually being impacted, right, is unnecessarily costly and complex. And so the proposal would exempt entities from applying modification accounting when, again, there's no economic effect to the remaining leases. So hopefully those 3 things will help entities out, again, reducing cost and complexity, not materially changing the underlying standard, but addressing implementation issues. The next exposure draft that we're going to talk about today is related to reference rate reform. So ASU 2020-04 is there to help entities, when LIBOR goes away, reduce cost and complexity. How it specifically says when you're going through that in 2020-04, it has to be applied to those contracts where the rate is being discontinued. And people have looked at some of the issues here. And when they look at this, there are changes in interest rates that are being used for margining, discounting, contract price alignment that in and of itself are not changing the reference rate, but are due to the entire concept of reference rate reform. Because remember, this is a global issue. It's not the global pandemic, but it's a global reference rate reform. And so people said, can we still apply 2020-04 when it's not specifically taking an LIBOR, but it's due to the transition to the new reference rate that we have this margining, derivative, or discounting, et cetera. And in this proposal, they would expand topic 848. If elected, again, it is an optional set of practical expedients and exceptions. So you don't have to use 848. But if you do, you would be able to apply it to derivative instruments that use the interest rate for margining, discounting, or contract price if it's modified as a result of reference rate reform. So really kind of just addresses the scoping issue. Does it change the underlying 2020-04? No, but it just provides a little bit more clarity as to what types of contracts are in scope. All right, so that's it for our 2-for-1 special. Always want to make sure that we give you these timely, and obviously the turnaround on that standard is very short. So I wanted to make sure you heard about it before the comment letters were due. So thank you guys so much for joining me on the Genuine Learning blog, and I hope to see you on a future blog. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.